Welcome to the cartoon series of art classes. This class focuses on tips and secrets when drawing cartoon, especially the bodies. We will be looking at helping you to achieve techniques to trigger how to be imaginative and creative with your cartoons, looking at what to look for when drawing the body of cartoons, focal points, how parts of the body work together. We look at the basic proportions of the bodies, the way to approach your cartoons, and obviously how you draw your lines, as well as great ideas for your cartoons. So what are cartoons? Cartoons are basically about pulling and adapting shapes and lines, taking them out of proportion to make them look in proportion. And that's what we're going to help you with today. In order to understand the cartoon process, we need to always look at the process and understand the basic body. Now, I have for now just drawn this in a basic skeletal structure so you can understand it. What you can do, you can obviously follow along in the DVD, or you can draw, pause in between, it's up to you. This is a relaxed class just to help you improve your techniques to becoming the successful cartoonist you'd like to be. So let's just look at the actual body. When you understand the proportions of the body, it helps you completely simplify and bring your cartoons to life. With the actual body, we need to look at how people use the body to be able to create more, to be able to create proportions, and how they actually draw the body. So if we look at the actual head, which is an oval shape, I'm going to just redraw a smaller version here for you, and this is a good reference for you to have whenever you need to look back when you're drawing your cartoons. So if I start by drawing the head first, which is an oval shape, what we need to do is we need to understand or find a way to make the head look in proportion with the rest of the body. Now what we tend to do is we tend to use the head as an actual measurement, a guideline for me to understand how tall to make the body and how short to make the body. So if I used the head, what I would do is you could either take a piece of paper and draw the head on a piece of paper, and I'm going to count the head down 8 times. So 1, 2, I'll make a mark there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The technique I've used is called the frozen technique, and you're just freezing your fingers to bring about your proportion. The only thing with that is that you're not sure whether your fingers are enlarging or creating a smaller area for your proportions. So why do we do that? So we can understand the basic proportion of the body, how to use the head as a measurement into the rest of your body. So with that, what you need to understand the basic proportion is you have the spine or the neck, we then have the shoulder blades. Now what I've done is if I actually take each line and turn it into a block, I can number these blocks. Now block number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now did you know in the basic proportions the head goes into the body 8 times, just in basic proportions? So that's going to help you when we start actually putting our cartoons together. When you understand more or less how things work, then that will simplify your pictures. Now with the second block at the bottom, that's usually where the bottom of the sternum is, and the sternum is what holds the rib cage together. Now if I draw a rib cage just as a basic heart shape, upside down heart shape. And I have it to possibly just in the middle over there, or slightly higher. In the middle of your block number 3 is usually where the belly button goes, and in behind that would be my spine. In block number 4 I would have the hip bones. It's again what you could call another heart shape, and that's where the sockets are for the kneecaps and the shin bones and the thigh bones. With the shoulder blades, your elbows generally, when you bend your elbows, bend by your hips, the top of your hips, and your forearms and hands end in the middle of your thigh bone. So this is just the basic proportion of an actual human body. Now, why do you need to understand this with cartoons? Because when you are pulling shapes out of proportion, you need to understand that cartoons are still technically showing that they are in proportion, because they use these skills of knowing a few points, like knowing that the elbow bends by the hip, knowing that the hands are halfway by the thighs. This is a great thing for you to keep as a reference guide for when you want to create your cartoons. Now what we're going to look at is we're going to look at how you use your proportion of your head when you're drawing cartoons. We look at a bit more detail, and if you want more information on how to understand proportions, there are other separate classes available, but I want to focus more on actually having fun with cartoons and playing. There are very simple techniques which we use which have helped a lot of people create successful cartoons. The one is, we look at, when you are approaching cartoons, number one, we look at the actual size of the head. Now, there's ways that you can play about. I'm going to show you a few demonstrations, and then you can obviously create your own cartoons. The one thing that you need to do is, if you're going to take things out of proportion, the other things need to be in proportion. So, for instance, what we will do is you will use your head as a measurement stick to help you. You can either use the head to draw 3 parts of the body. It's entirely up to you. So what we're going to look at is, you can either play with it and have a huge head, you can have a small tummy, but then the hands and the feet would be the same proportion as the head. Now, if you put your hand directly in front of your face, your hand is more or less the same size of your face. If you put your feet from your elbow to where your wrist is, that is the size of your feet. Now, what a lot of cartoon people do is they know all these proportions. So you could create, as an example, a head this big. You could have a small little body. Now, obviously, knowing our proportions, I know if I add an arm over here, that the elbow must bend by the top of the hip. So already I've got an advantage to creating proportion with my cartoons. If I added another shape over here, that would just show I'm building it or bending it. If I had small little legs, that doesn't matter, and small little arms, it doesn't matter. But now I'm going to make the hands more or less the same size as the face. And I can either keep the feet the same size or slightly bigger. But that has already started making my cartoon look in proportion. You'll understand more as we go along the types of ways you can approach your cartoons. The other way you can do is you can have a big head and a big tummy, but then the rest are all smaller. You can have a little head and a big body with little hands and feet. You can have a big head with a small body and big feet. So what is the secret to understanding how I actually approach this and what makes it look in proportion when I'm drawing my cartoons? There's a thing that we call, which is a focal point. Now, focal points mean the first thing that you look at on a picture, what draws your eye the first time you look at it. Generally, most artists only have 2 focal points in their paintings. And the reason for that is so that they don't take away the attention from what they actually want to achieve in their picture. Something stands out, it grabs you, and if you have more than 1 or 2 focal points, you start not wanting to look at the picture anymore. The eye becomes lazy. With cartoons, it's the same thing. You want 2 main focal points when you're drawing your cartoons so that you can create proportion, number 1, and number 2, get people to look at your pictures and your cartoons. What we're going to look at as well is we look at how to draw our lines. So I want you to have a look at various other cartoons, various other pictures, and go and look and see how they've used 2 focal points, made them really stand out by making them bigger than what they usually are, but they look in proportion, and how they've made the rest of the body smaller. The other thing that we needed to learn is obviously to remember the basic proportions of the body, because obviously if the hands or the arms bend at the waist, it will look in proportion, although it is out of proportion technically. If the thighs and the legs are bent at a certain place, that doesn't matter as long as you have your 2 focal points. Some people have a 3rd focal point, but what you've got to look for is, looks can be deceiving because they may just have a very big head and beak, or a very big hat, but the rest of the body is slightly smaller than the rest. The whole point is for you to be creative and see how to create your cartoons. The next thing we're going to look at is how to draw your lines when you are drawing cartoons. What I find a lot of people do is they are afraid to move their lines and they constantly rub out their lines while they're drawing. Now, how you can go about this to help you is by not being afraid of your lines firstly. And the way to approach this is, if I'm becoming a bit controlling with my lines and a bit scared to approach my lines, I start doing a very easy technique called the restating line technique. The restating line just gets me to relax, to unwind, and just to not control what I'm doing. So what you do is, if you draw your universal shapes, notice I'm holding my pencil towards the back. I draw a very light line, and I on purpose let the line go out of proportion or in the wrong place. Now I'm going to press hard so you can see what I've done, but you would be pressing lightly. Now all I do is I just go over that line again until I'm happy with where that line has moved. All I need to do is just consciously pick up the line and move it if I need to move it up, down, left or right. The reason why you don't rub out your lines when you're working with them is because naturally what happens is you rub out the line and you automatically draw the line back in the same place that you have just rubbed out. It starts a process of becoming uncomfortable and irritable, and that's not what you want to do while you're having fun with your cartoons. At the end of it, you can then use your filter pen or an ink pen, and you can go over the hard lines that you like, and then you can rub the lines out afterwards. But the lines are there to give you guidance so that if you make a mistake or an error, you can rub it out right at the end. Remember, don't always have the intention to draw the lines perfectly right the first time. Cartoons are about movement, and as you see in a lot of cartoon characters, when they are drawn, they use lots of circles, and a lot of people are too scared to use circles or many lines. The reason why they're using all these circles and pressing lightly is so that they can move their lines where they need to, adapt them, change their shapes, and also if the fingers are in the wrong place or they need to be longer or shorter, they can do that easily. If they need to make one hand the same proportion as the other, they then move that line easily. And if you are afraid of this and if you get scared, use your universal shapes to help you relax and draw comfortably without feeling you're making a mistake. It's a very good practice and a very good quick short technique when I'm getting frustrated drawing my cartoons. Now the other thing that we look at is how to get your ideas when you are drawing your cartoons. A lot of people sit down and try and think how they can actually put their cartoon together. What must they do? What I say to you is go and research lots of pictures. Start off with mammals, animals. Look at reptiles, look at dinosaurs. What you want to look at is you want to see and find the proportion of the animals like we did with the body. So for instance, as you can see there, I've done a little duck over there. And I want to turn this duck into a human being, technically. So what I know is that ducks have a beak. I know they have a shape of a head. I know that they have a body. I know they have tails and a feather for the tails. And I know that they have webbed feet. That's what I know about ducks. The reason why I'm really simplifying this for you is because this is how simple it is to do and draw cartoons as well as have fun with them. Now if I want to turn this little cartoon into an actual character, I already know my proportions of my body. So I know all I've got to look for is where do the elbows end, where are the hips and the chest, where do the hands more or less go, where do they end more or less, and my feet. Once I've done my basic proportions of that, then I look at what two focal points can I introduce. So let's go back again. What do we do when we do our cartoons? Number one, we find reference. So reference is I find pictures that inspire me, like animals, plants, whatever you feel you want to use. I then look at how to turn that reference into a character, a cartoon character. So if I want to turn it into a cartoon character, I need to look at the basic proportions of the body. And that would be, where are my elbows, where do my hands end, what are my basic shapes of the body. The third point I then look for is I want to place my focal points. What are going to be my main focal points? So the two parts of the body that I want to completely enlarge, which people will look at first. And like I said, what I've done here is I've made the duck's head quite big, but not as big as the beak. I've made the beak quite a focal point. I then look at what else can I enlarge. Well, the head and the beak are quite big, so then what I will do is I won't make the feet as big because the beak and the head are quite big. I remember that I need to press lightly, and I need to make sure that I'm obviously not going over the same line and I'm drawing many lines. I'm restating and fixing those lines, moving them and adapting them as I need to. I've taken inspiration by seeing, okay, so the arms bend halfway where the hips, the top of the hips are, and that's where I'm going to make sure my arms bend with my little duck. Now, usually when you're drawing cartoons, your basic universal shapes are what you use to draw, which are your squares, ovals, rectangles, triangles. Those are all your universal shapes. So if I simplify these and bend them, twist them, I'm adding the little tail. The thigh, I'm obviously adding at the joint part where the hips are. And the webbed feet, I just got inspired by looking at the picture, adding that one onto the body. Now obviously I'm not focusing on drawing faces today because I'm teaching you more to look at how to actually create your cartoon bodies when you are achieving your cartoons. Let's look at the little ladybug, for instance. The little ladybug, now you saw when you look at an insect, generally the head is much smaller than the body, which is no problem. So if I made the head small with a big body, I then have the shell, which is also quite big, and then I add little arms. Again, I bend the arms by the hip bones, and the little legs are very tiny over here. Now obviously with the little bug, I can't bring his hands right down. I could if I wanted to give him long hands, I could do that as well. But then I'd make sure that his arms are in the top part of his thigh part. It's all little short techniques for you to look at when you are drawing your pictures and your cartoons. You can look here, I've made a little dinosaur, and this time I've made his body quite big and his body the focal point, and I've made his tail quite big, so that I now have small little legs and feet, small arms and hands, and the head is not as big. You can see where the arms are bending by the top of the hips, and you can see that where his hand is ending is literally in the middle of his thigh. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. It's a lot of short techniques, tips and tools to use when you are creating your cartoon bodies. How to start getting creative, how to start being imaginative with your cartoon characters. And just recapping over what we've done, we looked at how to be imaginative with your cartoons, what we look for when we draw the body, focal points, understanding what focal points are about the body, how the proportions of the body help you understand when drawing your cartoons, ways to approach your focal points, so the size of the head, hands and feet, a big tummy, a small head. And we obviously looked at when you're drawing your lines, tips and tools, what to do to help you achieve that great cartoon atmosphere and have fun. I hope you've enjoyed your class, hoping that you're going to enjoy looking at your reference and creating your cartoons. Please feel free to email pictures of your cartoons you've created, and look forward to seeing you in other further lessons. Take care for now.